Let me go back to your first point about new therapies, personalized and precision care. What are the most exciting therapies what are the therapies in pipeline you are most excited about and looking forward and you think are going to be super beneficial to everyone over the next few years?
Well, I think they fall into a couple different categories. The area that I think that I'm most excited about right now is cellular therapies. The ability to take your own cells and using laboratory techniques, get them to target your own body's disease processes. And so we've seen great success for that in oncology with things like CAR T therapy. But now we're beginning to see that same technology being used in other areas like autoimmune diseases and other types of progressive diseases. So that's one area. Secondly, I think that genetic engineering still holds great promise. We've seen a couple drugs come to market that have completely eliminated childhood blindness disorders that have certain genetic disorders, and we're seeing now other companies bring these products to the market. Now, this has taken probably more time than what many people had hoped for. These are not quick processes, but I think we'll continue to see advances in certain diseases along that category. And then third, I think, is just the area of being able to do a better definition of how an individual responds to a certain therapy. The variation between how you and I might respond to certain diseases, what our side effects are, how we're going to metabolize it. I think that this is where we are going to see great advances in this personalization. Just like, people, when they watch their video streaming, they have personal choices. You may like action films and I may like comedies. And our video service learns that.
Correct.
We're going to see that same type of application in healthcare and pharmaceuticals as well.
Yeah. It's interesting, some of these things you're talking about were the holy grail when we had started Indegene, and that was the exciting thing. It's just that in healthcare, it takes so much more time. But of course, these things look much more real from evolution perspective now than they were, of course.
Well, I think just seeing the tremendous growth that Indegene has had over these last couple of years indicates that all the work that you and your colleagues began many, many years ago, it was probably very early at the time, and many people probably wondered what are they doing? But the world is ready for the types of things that you're doing and that so many people here have skills for. There aren't many companies as well positioned as Indegene to respond to this right now.
Thank you. Listen, I've got you. You don't get a perspective from a policymaker so often. You spoke about the whole healthcare at home, those kind of shifts. How do you think policymakers are thinking about the risk of those? The advantages are very obvious, but many times risk mitigation and putting the right regulatory frameworks to make sure that these things, at least in healthcare, go the right way. Are the policymakers thinking about those right now? One is data, of course, right? Where a lot of work is going on. But are there any other risks? Are there any standards being put in place for that?
There definitely are. I mean, I think you're correct. Policymakers tend to be risk adverse. They tend to want to put safety and avoiding a problem ahead of moving quickly or innovating. But I think that these trends have been around a long time in healthcare, that you can show that care outside of hospitals is moving quickly. So one example would be in the United States, the government, Medicare, had a whole series of diagnoses that were called hospital only. They would only pay for a hip replacement if you were in the hospital. They've now done away with that regulation. And so what you're seeing is much of the hip replacement surgery is now being done in outpatient surgery, where a couple of years ago, it had to be done in the hospital. So the regulators are moving and adopting to what they're seeing. They do it through the study of trials that are studied to show that they're safe. But once they are demonstrated to be safe, they do change the regulations. The difference in the federal government, in the Department of Health and Human Services, where Medicare and the healthcare programs sit, the vast majority of that program is changed through regulation. Regulation is done by the agency itself. So Medicare can say, we're going to move our policy to allow people to get cared at home. They don't need to go to Congress for a vote on that.
Sure.
In the Department of Veteran Affairs that I ran, most everything that we did required a legislative rather than a regulatory change. Right. So I would have to go back to Congress and to the president and get people to agree. So change can actually happen faster on the Health and Human Services side. So I do think you're going to see more of these changes happening quicker.
Sure. David, this was super interesting and helpful, and I could go on and on. It was so good to learn from you. And this discussion, at least from my perspective, could go for the next few hours. But once again, thank you so much for being with us in our office in Bangalore. It was great to host you over here. Thank you once again.
No, thank you. The learning's going both ways. I think seeing the work that you're doing and how committed you are to these changes is frankly inspirational. So thank you for this visit.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.